Hey folks, Professor Finn here, and today we're going to be looking at the final 3 chapters in Dr. Ralph Klicker's Funeral Service Psychology and Counseling. Let's go ahead and get the presentation up. And we will start with Chapter 17, which is the Funeral Director's Own Grief. The last 3 chapters in this book are very, very small, so rather than having couple of smaller videos, I'm just going to pile these all together and go from there. Let's get the pen. In order to be emphatic, you need to have an understanding of what the person is going through. Funeral directors report that their own issues of grief can surface when having to handle a loss similar to a loss they personally experienced. Having unresolved loss issues that arise when dealing with a grieving family, handling a particularly horrendous death, and having a close personal relationship with the deceased. Funeral directors are human beings too, and we will lose friends, family, co-workers, etc. So we are just as open to bad grief as any other human being. It is helpful for funeral directors to also be aware of issues or anxiety they may have about their own personal death. Try to get to a point where you have done some thought on your own death if you haven't done so. Do what you tell all your families to do. Having a clear sense of what happens to yourself when you die will aid you personally when you experience a loss in life. We are always telling our families, communicate your wishes to others. Write things down. Tell people where those things are. Funeral directors and licensed funeral professionals need to do the same. Looking at one's own experience with death and grief can help a funeral director. Be aware of interactions and limitations in working with clients in different kinds of grief situations. Discover unresolved issues, and identify resources that help the funeral director and help the client. So start with a loss analysis. One way to start the self-inventory is to start by making a loss timeline. Ask questions to yourself. That concludes Chapter 17, and as a side note, the textbook does provide a loss analysis for you to fill out. We're just simply not going to do that here in the online environment. So let's talk about stress in the funeral director, Chapter 18. Stress is a life event that exerts pressure or strain. A stressor is any event capable of producing stress. So, licensed funeral professionals are exposed to similar stress-producing factors common in other groups such as medical, human service, and business. From the medical aspect, we have an intimate involvement of body and body processes. We're very closely related for the stresses that pathologists encounter. We must know about public health and safety measures to protect self and community. We must restore the dead to a normal appearance to facilitate healthy grieving. Any mistake we make will have a devastating effect on survivors and then put us under the stress of either an investigation by the licensing authority or having to deal with a lawsuit. And the stress of wanting the family to be satisfied is always present. From a human services standpoint, we are in a constant exposure to emotional crises. We must be able to counsel the survivors as well as determine the plan of the funeral. We customize activities that help the client individually heal. Stress about getting everything right can be overwhelming to some licensed professionals, and it can sometimes be frustrating when dealing with various groups. So, excellent point to be made here is not everyone is okay with a VFW or active duty military honor guard providing military honors at their facility. There are several churches that I can remember from my time in practice that would not allow any sort of military honors on or near the church, and if pastor was doing something at the funeral home, the same could also be said. Now, when at pastor's home, pastor's rules apply. When pastor is at funeral home, Different rules may apply depending on how much you want to keep any business coming from that church. So those will be things that you have to consider, that if pastor doesn't like the rifles going off while he is there, then perhaps pastor should leave as soon as the service is done, so that way when the VFW gets set up, that he is not inconvenienced by having to observe the shooties going off. From a business aspect, well, funeral homes are businesses, and all the common financial and managerial problems of all businesses, plus individual ones specific to our industry, do apply. Now working in upper executive management, so to speak, I have to handle a lot of personnel problems and a lot of dispute resolution. If I had to couple that with actually running the finances of my business, meeting with families, doing removals, doing embalmings, that would be quite overwhelming. That's why I'm also very grateful for the team that I have. The lack of control of time is one of our biggest stressors. Unscheduled hours, loss of holidays, loss of special days, and disturbed sleep. I blatantly admit that I would not like to return to funeral service. There are certainly things that I miss being an active funeral director, making arrangements and doing things of that nature. I will not pretend that I don't. But one thing that I enjoy getting into my advanced old age is being able to crawl into bed and go to sleep. And if my phone rings, I know it's not an answering service calling me. I enjoy having my holidays with my family. Now, I am also not naive. If something happened to my immediate circumstances and I had to go back into funeral service practice, I know what that means, and I am not going to have the luxury of spending holidays with my family, etc., etc., etc. That is part of the job. That's all there is to it. And if you are lucky enough to work at a firm that gives you certain holidays off or gives you a certain on-call rotation, that is wonderful to hear, but that is not the norm. Because we miss all these things, we then start having marital and parenting problems. Managers, funeral directors, and even staffers deal with this. Your part-time staff that comes and helps you out and opens doors and drives cars, they're giving up those days with their family too. Keeping people motivated means more than just a paycheck. It requires creativity, understanding, and communication. All stress is not harmful or negative. Excitement, anticipation, these are stressors as well, but they can make the event more enjoyable. So, for instance, I was made aware that Lego came out with a train set based on the Murder on the Orient Express. And when I first heard this was happening, I got extremely excited because I am a nerd for some of those Lego sets. Well, it certainly made me happy when I walked into my Lego store and I got one, because I was excited it was coming because I am a child. Stress depends greatly on our mental attitude and ability of our bodies to deal effectively with outside influences. We'll take that same information, that same type of situation, and hey, Lego is coming out with a Titanic model. Well, one, expensive, which means if I buy something like that, that's going to hurt me in the pocketbook. That may create stress because now I'm putting myself in a poor financial position. The second thing is, what if I do have the cash and I want it bad and no one ever has it? Well, depending on my attitude, that might make me grumpy when I go to work. And I have seen people take out these emotions on their coworkers when something's not going their way, they can't find something they want. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Lego set, but it could be something like the ideal piece of technology they use. Back in the day, I worked at Best Buy, and I saw what people were like when they did not get the latest video game system because we ran out of stock or something. That has a pretty negative effect on the people around you, and yeah, problem. Like grief, people react to stress differently. What is positive and exciting for one person can be negative and destructive to another. And me personally, my doctors have told me that lots of stress are pretty bad for my ticker. And I do not tend to get stressed. No matter how bad the situation is, I just tend not to get stressed because it is very unhealthy for me. So when things are going really south, I am convinced that that is a good thing because when I hit rock bottom, the only thing I can do is start going up. So now that we're there, I can isolate the immediate things that need my attention and start crawling my way out of the pit. When confronted with stress, your body reacts in two ways. The first, chemical messages are sent from brain to hypothalamus, which stimulates chemicals, causing two more routes. One is the pituitary gland, which initiates the adrenal cortex and produces chemicals that increase blood sugar and metabolism. The other is the brainstem and spinal cord, which stimulate the adrenal glands that produce adrenaline to fuel muscles and brain, and norepinephrine to increase heartbeat and blood pressure. So what do we have that's going on here? Your body is injecting sugar into your bloodstream. Sugar is easily combustible, metabolized by your body. It is increasing your rate of metabolism. So it's giving you energy. And then the next thing it does is it jump kicks you into overdrive with adrenaline, which then fuels muscles and norepinephrine to increase heartbeat and blood pressure. It takes the sugar that's being injected, it is shooting everywhere, and it is putting you in fight or flight mode. The body is preparing a fight or flight response as a result of the exposure to the stressor, and this is a positive defense mechanism. However, when it becomes long-term, we encounter serious side effects as they do not generate a physical response, as they generate a physical response which wears away at the body and causes burnout. If you are running your car, and we'll say for the sake of argument that your car is mechanically sound and reliable, if you were just to sit there and put the pedal completely down and run the engine as high as possible for as long as possible, eventually your engine is going to seize up. It is going to break. It has to. It is not engineered to run at that level indefinitely, even with proper maintenance. Your body is no different. Burnout is when your mind and body are relentlessly strained by physical, emotional, and mental fatigue. It produces feelings of hopelessness, powerlessness, cynicism, resentment, failure, depression, and unhappiness. Characteristics of burnout are something you need to be very, very familiar with. Exhaustion and loss of energy, irritability and impatience, cynicism and attachment, physical complaints, disorientation, confusion, omnipotence and feeling indispensable, depression, minimization and denial of feelings. Whenever you start checking off boxes on this list, that is your clue that you need to step away and take a break. That completes chapter 18, and now on to the final chapter of the book, Taking Care of the Caregiver. Funeral direction is one of the most demanding professions in American culture. Death care is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. In addition to your work schedule, the stress of dealing with the bereaved can put a heavy burden on the caregiver. Now, this does not imply that we are caring for someone at home. We, as funeral professionals, are caregivers. So in addition to our work schedule, which is already erratic, the stress of dealing with people in constant states of bereavement can really have an effect on us. So there is no one way for everyone to take better care of themselves, as it's highly individual. The American Board of Funeral Service Education recommends the following. The first, and the most important, recognize that you are subject to burnout. Recognize that you might have a problem. Create periods of rest and renewal. That is something that I am horrible about, me personally. I have a very hard time of saying, hey, I'm just going to stop what I'm doing and walk away from it and take a couple days off, because I am not used to doing that. My entire life, I have worked multiple jobs, I have worked on holidays, etc., etc., etc. So now, when I can step away, I have to stop and think about and tell myself it is okay for me to do that, because I cannot continue to work 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. Be compassionate with yourself about not being perfect. This is something I tell my subordinates fairly regularly. I do not have an expectation that you will work at my level. I hold myself to an unrealistic level, and I recognize that. But I will not hold other people to my standard. That is not fair to them. And in essence, it's also not fair to myself, because I may be holding myself to an unrealistic standard. Set limits and alleviate stress you can do something about. I tell people all the time, there comes a time in my day where I stop answering my phone. I am not going to work on something. And generally speaking, that is true. If emergencies happen, if something really catastrophic is occurring, I am not an idiot. I am going to step in and I'm going to be the leader that I am. That is the job. But leadership is by example. Work during my work time, rest during my rest time. And I don't want people working 14, 15, 16-hour days just because. And I don't want employees thinking that that is the expectation. I'm going to throw some shade out. I am not Elon Musk. Now, I don't know how much of what I read about Mr. Musk and his treatment of his employees is. However, his name and Amazon seem to pop up with regular frequency when it comes to employees getting worked pretty hard. So, I set the limits, which means if I'm not doing something at a certain time, perhaps you need to stop as well. Some things can wait until tomorrow. And that's just the truth of the matter. I have found as I get older, most things can wait till tomorrow, because after hours work is just going to exhaust you even more. Learn time management skills. I can tell you that I hate Microsoft Teams. I absolutely detest it. I can also tell you that without Microsoft Teams and its calendar, my life would be an absolute mess. Everything I do happens in Teams. So as much as I dislike it, I also recognize it is a fairly good tool for my use. I also remember a time where I would carry a small black binder with a Velcro attachment, and that would be everything that happens in my life, my day planner. And that has largely been replaced in whichever form of my digital device that I am using at that moment, my cell phone. Very simply, I have to have a calendar or else I'm going to forget everything on my life. And I am open in telling people, if you don't set an appointment, I am not going to remember. Please send me the invite. It has to go on my calendar, or I will forget, or I will do something else at that time. Cultivate a personal support network. Have the people that support you. Be with your friends. Talk to your family members. Take the time and go do things. Understand your motivation for working in funeral service. Develop healthy eating, sleeping, and exercise patterns. Now, I am morbidly obese here in September 2024. Largely, it is because I am lazy and lethargic. I don't like doing things. That being said, I do enjoy lifting weights, and I lift frequently. However, what I need to do, and I know I need to do it, is I need to set a consistent pattern. So approximately 1 week ago, I am using my time management to set patterns for myself of when I am exercising and when I am doing certain things. And one thing I have found for myself that I have never done before in my life, but I found useful, hence why I am discussing it with you, is right before I go to bed, I do a 10-minute exercise pattern. So find any app or any online listing for lazy man workout, and then do 30-second sets of whatever lazy man exercises right before you go to bed. So that if nothing else, you are doing something, whether it's step jacks, whether it's squats, whether it's stretches. For 10 minutes, you are doing something right before you go to bed. And then go do your evening ritual and go to sleep. And what I find is I sleep a little bit better, or I have been sleeping a little bit better over this last week because I am doing that thing. And I can tell you, there are some days I start getting close to time and I just don't want to do anything. I just want to go to bed. But I hold myself accountable. I do what I want, or I do what I'm supposed to do, and I get it done. And then I go to bed whether I like it or not. Most important, identify ways in which your body informs you that you are stressed. You will know certain indicators. Make sure you are paying attention to those indicators. Talk about your worries. Communication is important for you and clients. It's important for you as a human being. So talking to others about your stresses is important. Realize you are not perfect. As much as you would like to pretend you are probably not perfect. Something is going to slip through the cracks. You are as human as the person next to you. Control your what-if scenario. Have a plan A, have a plan B, and have a plan C. Put some thought into things. Delegate some responsibility and authority. It is very hard for me not to be the worker. It is very, very hard for me not to be the worker. But in the role I play now, I can't always be the worker. So I engage some people around me to do some of the things that they can get done either more efficiently or they are more knowledgeable with, so that I am not having to spend time learning and try to figure something out from scratch. Utilize the resources that you have and delegate some of those things to parties that may do them better than you do. The next thing is identify stressors. When you identify what stresses you out, here's a hint. You can avoid it. So, for instance, I live in a town just outside of Dallas, Texas right now. If I want to do anything in Dallas proper, it is a 45-minute to 1-hour ride without traffic. This means if I want to get in and get out before the mess happens, I better plan my day accordingly. One of my big stressors is sitting in crappy traffic. I hate sitting in traffic. It drives me nuts. So I know that means I'm waking up earlier than most, or I have to wait till everyone's at work and then adjust things accordingly. And I have found that when I plan those things accordingly, my life is much less stressful. Control your mental confrontations. You don't have to fight every fight that comes your way. So, don't. Blow off steam if necessary. One of the things I like to do to blow off steam is, once a month, I tend to hold a live stream. Just to talk about news, make fun of some things, talk to people, answer questions. I literally enjoy live streaming. Other times, I'll jump on the Xbox or PlayStation and I will goof around on that. Those are ways that I blow off steam. If I'm really upset, that's usually when I'm doing something physical. I spend 20 or 30 minutes going on a walk, I grab some weights, I do something like that. Know what your stressors are and know what techniques you can use to effectively blow through that stress. Perform some type of physical activity. I largely have let myself go over the last year because I am sitting at a desk for hours on end, and it is not in my routine. When I was working in Miami, I had my routine fairly well set of when I would take my little 1.5 mile walk every day, or if it is an off day or a weekend, when I would do the walk or when I'd be on the treadmill. I have let that go. So now I have to build that back into my routine. And again, I have found that a simple 10 minutes a day of some physical exertion helps me sleep way better than I like to take credit for. And what I need to start doing is 30 minutes of walking every single day. Any cardiologist, any nurse will tell you it's only 30 minutes of walking. You don't have to jog, you don't have to run. You just need 30 minutes of light cardio. And that will greatly increase your body's behavior. Try soaking in a hot bath. Now, I am literally jealous of people that can do that. I am 6'1". Most tubs are uncomfortable and too short, but I will tell you that a hot shower is a good close second. And the moment I can get a hot tub out back, I'm going to get one. Use one or more relaxation techniques. A lot of people say, hey, I'm not going to do this hippie crap. I'll tell you what, breathing techniques are very good. Meditation techniques are extremely helpful. And for those of you that are Christian, discover meditative prayer. Killing two birds with one stone, proverbially. Talk with another counselor. Funeral directors like to talk to each other. And if we're not talking smack about each other, we are sharing war stories. Why? Because we relate to each other. We understand, and we know what people are going through. You are not a magician unless you are. I like studying card tricks. I absolutely suck at them, but I like watching them, and I like seeing how they work. You need counseling too. I have a friend of mine who I went to college with. She became a clinician, and she has a therapist, and she is a therapist. And she has tried to convince me years ago to also just go to therapy. And I don't. I don't see the need or value in that at this point in my life. And part of that is because I do a lot of self-evaluation of myself, and I'm very honest with myself. So I identify my issues, and I tend to take care of my issues as best as I can. Be attentive to other staff members who are working with the bereaved. Sometimes you just got to say, hey, tap out, time to go home. You're not in a good place right now. You're not in the right frame of mind. You look tired. And if you can't send them home, hey, it looks like you're having a hard time. I got the door. Go in the back and take 15, 20 minutes. Just chill. Take a break. Not going to kill you to get them off their feet. You're permitted to feel helpless. You are permitted to feel helpless. It's a valid feeling. You're not going to save everyone. You can't save everyone. It's unrealistic. And sometimes bad things happen and you have no way of changing it. So just accept that you are helpless in that situation. You are permitted to admit to feeling helpless at times. You are permitted to admit that you feel helpless. One thing that was very profound for me, and I can't say that I idolize Star Trek, any one of its shows, or Star Wars, or any one of its shows. But I was watching an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, and in this one particular episode, Captain Picard was on a planet stuck with the good doctor. And so, somehow or another, they were able to read each other's mind. And I don't remember the specifics of it. But Picard says something like, yep, it's going to be right over this dune. And Dr. Crusher says, you don't know that, and you can't lie to me right now. In fact of the matter is, it was all about the confidence. Putting on the air, the strength, the appearance, because as the leader, you have to inspire. And if they see you, if your subordinates see you broken and dejected and confused, that's going to have a tremendous problem. That's going to generate a tremendous problem. So it's good for you to admit to feeling helpless so that people around you know it's okay to feel helpless as well. Know what characterizes a trigger case for you so you can be prepared and respond accordingly. There's all sorts of triggering events out there. There's all sorts of things that upset people. There are certain words I can't use on YouTube because it's going to get me blacklisted and I'm going to get a hit against my channel because I dared say a bad word. The problem is when we take away any sort of silliness regarding this idea of triggering events, there is absolutely in our world triggers as funeral professionals we have to be aware of. For some folks, it's young children. Can't handle those cases. It's very hard. For some others, it might be military veterans because they served. For some others, it might be motorcycle or homicide or whatever it might be. Know what is a trigger case and know when you might need to tap out. Now, I have to also say that at some point, you have to rough it up because that's the job. But if you have good coworkers, you can usually tap out on the really bad ones that you can't handle and someone else can step in and take that for you. You trade a case for a case. It is what it is. So know what characterizes a trigger case for you so you can be prepared, you could brace yourself, you could get help, whatever it takes. Folks, thank you for sticking through all of the chapters on this textbook. Hope you found it informative. As always, send your questions to askbigbadfinn@gmail.com or post something in the comments, and I can respond. Y'all take care, and I will see you next lecture.